Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at Galerie Myrtis. We're very privileged and honored to have Dr. Diala Touré, the Curator of Collections from Morgan State University. Before I go into a formal introduction, I'd like to talk a little bit about the exhibition that we have here, which is the African Presence in Renaissance Europe, the Contemporary Response. This exhibition, as many of you know, is in response to the Walters exhibition. And in our exhibition here at Galerie Myrtis, we are responding to the lives of the Africans who lived in the Renaissance, during the Renaissance period in Europe. And what the artists here are touching upon and dealing with are the same issues that the Africans did then. Issues of misperceptions about who they were, the devaluation of their language and culture, identity and conformity. And so the works are very profound, very creative and innovative in the ways in which they've responded to those issues. So we are grateful to have you here to experience the artwork, and I hope that you are also traveling to or have been to the Walters so that you can see the dialogue that's going on between the two exhibitions. What I consider our exhibition to be is in the tradition of African music, the call and response, where the Africans who served during the Renaissance in their various capacities as diplomats, servants, slaves, tradesmen, are calling forth, their spirits are calling forth to the contemporary artists who are responding in that tradition. And we would also like, or I would also like to plug that we are in the current issue of the Afro. I thank Jeanette Weimer, a dear friend who is a writer, and she wrote this beautiful article about the partnership with the Walters, so we're very grateful to her for that. And now on to Dr. Touré, who is a renowned scholar and appraiser of African art. She currently serves as the curator of collections and exhibitions at the James E. Lewis Museum of Art in Baltimore, Maryland. Dr. Touré has an extensive academic and museum tenure in elite universities, such as the University of Pennsylvania, Bryn Mawr College, the University of California at Berkeley, and the University of San Francisco. Dr. Touré has consulted worldwide with numerous international museums, art galleries, corporations, private collectors, and art dealers. Born and educated in Paris, France, Dr. Touré received her doctorate degree summa cum laude in history of art from the University of Sorbonne. She speaks 5 languages, holds global speaking engagements, and has authored a book and numerous articles. Dr. Touré, we thank you in coming here today to present to us Louise Marie-Therese, the heiress not to be.
Thank you very much, Myrtis. I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you to my friends who came, and thank you. It's a very, very special moment for me, and I chose to introduce Louise Marie-Therese. I have a strong French accent, so some of you might want me to repeat at times, which I won't get offended at all. And so what I will do first is to introduce Louise Marie-Therese, and then at the end of my talk, I will be very happy to take a few questions from you. Okay. First of all, I would like to tell you why I chose to introduce this nun, whose name was Louise Marie-Therese. Many years ago, in Paris, I went to a very particular library, which is known as the Bibliothèque Sainte-Geneviève. And when I walked, past the hall, there was a big portrait, this portrait of a nun. Being in my early 20s and just, going into this very particular, very important building in France, I was very intrigued. And, I was proud to see, as an official portrait of a black nun. But that was it. You know, I just, so I was happy and, you know, continued my days. A few years later, I came across a text that is in this particular book titled Black Women in Antiquity. And this text talked about the nun, well, the Black Nun of Moret, okay? So that was her nickname, the Black Nun of Moret. And it's very short, actually, so I would recommend for all of you to, you know, maybe take a look at the end of my talk at this article, but it's very interesting. Just introduced her as being the daughter of a queen of France. Of course, you know, I mean, I've been a student in France for all my, I would say, I mean, my young years, and I never ever heard, you know, about her. Nevertheless, she is one of France's little dirty secrets. So, as I was preparing my talk, you know, and I spoke with some of my friends in Paris, they told me that, oh yeah, I heard about her. Yeah, that's, you know, it rings a bell. So our title, the Negroid Nun of Moret, is actually a very particular title that I will explain in a few minutes. So before I get started, I would like to give you a few terms that I will be using, and that for some of you may be familiar with those, and some of you might not. So first of all, the dauphin. In fact, dauphin means in English dolphin, and that was a royal title given to the heir apparent to the throne of France. Moret is the town near Paris and near Fontainebleau that I will be talking about. Mores is actually derived from mort, and in English translated with Moorish, and it's a reference to the Moor of Venice. In the 17th century France, any black person was called a Moor. Dahomey is the modern Benin, and the Benedictines are a Roman Catholic religious order. So this talk is very particular because I will cover a few things here, you know, a few taboos. Okay, we'll be dealing with some taboos here. Extramarital relations, the relationship between a white woman and a black man, relationship between the queen and her toy, an illegitimate birth, a claim to a throne by a non-white and a cultural other, and a black royal figure in a convent. So, Louise Marie-Therese was born in Paris. This is actually the former palace. This is now a museum, the Musée du Louvre, Museum of the Louvre. But before and until the 17th century, that was the palace where the king resided. So this is a portrait of the Black Nun of Moret that was certainly painted towards the end of the 17th century. So Louise Marie-Therese was born in 1664, so in the Louvre in Paris, and she was named after both her mother, Marie-Therese, and her father. Well, I mean, Louis was Louis the 14th, and so Louise is after the father, and Marie-Therese after the mother. In 1695, she will enter at the convent of the Benedictine convent in Moret, and where she will have her final vows as a nun. And in 1732, she dies at this particular convent in Moret. So in this particular period, black people were, when you encounter a black person in France, more likely, so it could be a diplomat, that's in the history, but it could very often be a slave, someone working or, you know, being in a circus, or a gift to noble families. So this presentation could be actually titled "The Queen, the Dwarf, and the King." That will be a very appropriate title because we will be dealing with all this. Actually, I would say all this mess. So Louise Marie-Therese is the daughter of Queen Marie-Theresa or Marie-Therese, who herself was the daughter of King Philip IV of Spain and Elizabeth of France. And her father was King Louis XIV. How would you say this? Allegedly? Queen, King, okay, allegedly. All right. So the mother, Marie-Therese of Spain, or Maria Teresa of Spain, was born in 1638 and died in 1683. She's a very interesting character, a queen who felt very who felt abandoned by her husband, who had multiple affairs, and she herself bore 6 children, and out of the 6 children, in fact 2, but officially 1 survived. In fact, 2 survived, the Black Nun of Moret and the Dauphin. The father was Louis XIV. And so he was born in the 17th century, so 1638, and died in 1715. He's known all over the world because he was known as the, someone knows? The Sun King. Yes, the Sun King. So he's the one who actually built the castle, or for whom the castle of Versailles was built. And he's the one who moved from Paris to Versailles. Okay, so this was the palace. So we went from the Louvre to Versailles. The king was very, very extravagant. He was extremely vain. He wanted France to be the capital, or I would say Versailles to be the capital of the world. He wanted to have an unparalleled building, and you all heard of the Hall of Glasses. So he was very, very eccentric. And the gardens are fabulous. If you ever go to Paris, please go and see the Castle of Versailles. It's nearby Paris, and it's really fabulous. So anyway, so that's he was known to be a philanderer, and he was known to have had, so of course, Louis is his son, the Dauphin, but also many, many illegitimate children. Okay. So that we talked about the mother, the father. Now the brother is Louis the Great Dauphin. So born in 1661 and died in 1711. He knew the existence of his sister, and actually he went several times to the convent of Moret to visit her. Okay, so that's, but in history, in historical records, Louis the Dauphin is the sole heir to Louis XIV and Marie-Therese or Maria Teresa. So to the official father, there was an official father, and an official father and the real father. You know, the type of father who would be delighted if today, in the 21st century, someone had to prove his paternity, and he would go to shows like, you know, those crazy shows that you can see on TV, where people cheer, and you know, when they hear that they are the father. So anyway, so yes, so Nabo was the father. So he came as a gift. He was gifted to the queen by King Arda and of Dahomey. He was used as a toy and a pet. And in fact, in this particular time, Marie-Therese was the queen who introduced this notion to have, black dwarfs as pets. And so she kind of, she launched this fashion, and many women at the court later on, had their own dwarfs, black dwarfs. So they are also known as blackamoors. So in different accounts, Nabo is described as a creature, a monster, or a poor soul. Here you can see a portrait of the queen and Nabo with some kind of, I think, gift or something. Another portrait here, the king, the queen being taken care of, and the black dwarf again, and another. So that was really a fashion, and that was something that, every, I would say, distinguished lady at the court should have. An account here by Madame de Montespan at the end of the 16th century. The queen took a great fancy to this black creature. Sometimes it gamboled about and turned somersaults on her carpet like a kitten, or frolicked about on the bureau, the sofa, and even the queen's lap. As she passed from one room to another, he used to hold up her train and delighted to catch hold of it, and so make the queen stop short suddenly, or else cover his head with face with it, for mischief, to make the courtiers laugh. He was arrayed in a regular African costume, wearing handsome bracelets, armlets, a necklace ablaze with jewels, and a splendid turban. That's one of the descriptions of Neville. So apparently, and there is no description about this, but the proximity or the promiscuity between the queen and Nabo produced this little girl, okay, Louise Marie-Therese. And so when the queen became pregnant, she started being extremely defensive, okay? And so she explained that, first of all, after she had given birth, the reason why the little girl was black was that she had a heavy taste for chocolate. She had repeated dark thoughts for months due to the king's liaison with Mrs. de Lavalière. She said that she had repeated and penetrating looks from Nabo during her pregnancy, and she said that she used to see monsters all the time. So that was the explanation for her pregnancy, for the result of her pregnancy. As you hire those today, you have all these companies that are, which target is to preserve, your or save your reputation, or that it's been tarnished. So the same thing happened at this time, and well, in order to save the queen's honor, then all kinds of accounts were written, and one of them was actually by some genealogists, that the queen had given birth to a purple child, and she had a very difficult delivery, and therefore the child became purple. Then some other people stated that the baby was not black at all. It was just extremely ugly. Some other accounts stated that the baby died at birth, and some other accounts mentioned that the baby was born black, but he had terrible features. So those are the types of accounts that were associated with the birth of this little Louise Marie-Therese. From the memoirs by the Duchess de Montpensier, Monsieur told me that the baby girl, which she, the queen, had given birth to, resembled a small Moor who was very pretty, the one who was always with the queen. That when it was remarked that her baby resembled the Moor, he was removed, that the little girl was horrible, that she wouldn't leave. So another account too here. I wanted to say, needless to say, that right after the birth of the little Louise Marie-Therese, Nabo disappeared mysteriously. Some accounts. So that was the story, and I will, develop in a little while here. But that was the story that was carried from the 17th, 18th, and 19th century about this queen having a black child. So in the 19th century, a very, very famous French author, his name is Victor Hugo, wrote that, quote, Mary-Therese of Spain had been overly close to her Negro, hence the black nun. And another account by Touchard de la Fosse in his Chronicles of 1860, stating that it was a weakness for the queen that she regretted for the rest of her life. So when the little girl was born, so she became an embarrassment for the queen and of course the king. Some people would say, well, it's retribution. The king was philandering. Apparently some accounts say that he had been with black women, so why not, the queen? There is a song actually by Johnny Taylor. Some people know him in the 1970s. You know the song? You know the song I'm talking about? Okay, it says, for some people, who knows Johnny Taylor here? Some of you, right? Yeah. The song says, you know Johnny Taylor? It says, who's making love to your... Yeah. Okay, all right. So that's, so that's what happened to poor Louis XIV. But anyway, so yes, so this little girl had to disappear. And so she was first placed with a family in the outskirts of Paris. And she lived with a family for 20 years. The queen still wanted to, she couldn't go and visit her daughter, but she still wanted to make sure that she was very well taken care of. So she made sure that, she received everything she needed, and she made sure, and in fact the king made sure that she was, financially protected. So in 1695, she was placed in a convent. And there are all kinds of intrigues, and all kinds of stories. I won't go, at length, talking about these stories. But so in 1695, she was placed she entered the convent, and she took her final vows. She had requested that the royal family be there. And the royal family was there when she took her vows. So a lot of ink was shed about it, but the royal family nevertheless was there. So this is actually the town of Moret sur Loing, which is very close to Paris. It's about 40 miles from Paris, and it's close to the castle of Fontainebleau, which was also a very important castle. So when she entered in this convent, the Mother Superior knew exactly who she was, but she wanted to make sure that she was protected, okay? And so, so she was welcome. She did, you know, everything like the other nuns, but because of her particular status, she received special treatment, and she also received a lot of visits by dignitaries. Louis XIV went to visit her, and her brother, Louis the Dauphin, came to visit her numerous times. Some other people came, some courtiers, some courtesans, you know, and make sure that she was taken care of. In 1695, so that's not an 8, that's a 9, there is this letter by the king that is sent to the Mother Superior, stating that the king has agreed to pay the dowry for Louise Marie-Therese, and basically it says here, and I will, you know, translate quickly. So please remit it was 300 pounds yearly to Louise Marie-Therese. So she received until the end of her life 300 pounds, you know, and was taken care of. She had issues, you know, with some other nuns, of course, because some people felt she was crazy. She was very, very proud of who she was, and extremely, you know, she was saying something like, she could say something like, my brother the Dauphin is supposed to come today, or, you know, he's hunting nearby, and she was supposed to be, some people wanted her to hush, basically, and she was not going to hush because she was very proud of her origin. And again, she had a very good relationship with her brother, the Dauphin. A lot of intrigues about her, you know, a lot of novels in the 19th century, 20th century, you know, about her history. One theory was that one royal dignitary came to visit her and fell madly in love with her, and he decided that he wanted to take her out of the convent. They went to see the king, and he asked officially for her hand, and the king declined. But basically, so all kinds of theories. Another story about a nun who knew too much, went ahead and told about her story and mysteriously disappeared, and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting to see all kinds of intrigues, you know, and in fact a lot of ink was shed about this particular Black Nun of Moret, and she was known in town. She was very, again, like I said earlier on, you know, very conscious and very proud of her origin. So this is the Bibliothèque Sainte-Geneviève. This is the Library Sainte-Geneviève in Paris. So again, it's one of the main libraries in Paris. So that's the interior. This is Louise Marie-Therese. So this particular portrait, apparently there were some other portraits, but the painter is anonymous. And so this is an unsigned portrait. It's an oil on canvas. She's portrayed here as a young adult in her habit, you know, and her veil, and her black veil. You can see that she has a very, she appears to be a very confident person. You know, she has a small smile, and you know, she stares at the. Yeah, she has a staring stare. So this portrait in 1779 was hung in the Mother Superior's office. And since the 19th century, this portrait is displayed at the Bibliothèque Sainte-Geneviève in Paris, and the archives of this library So LMT stands for Louise Marie-Therese. So the file about her is empty, but there is a sole title, Documents about the Moorish Louis XIV's daughter. All right, so yeah, I felt that her story was very, very interesting you know, historically, because here was a young person whose, you know, origin were royal. She was from a royal descent. She also had some black, some African blood, and of course she had no claim to the throne. Okay, no claim at all. And some people say yes, that's the past, and you know it doesn't. I mean, it happened, but you know it's the past, and no such thing could happen today. Of course not. Of course not. I would like to ask you, since you read the news and you know exactly what happens in the world, could you name one black heir to the throne who has been outcast recently? Everybody knows about him. His father has, you know, acknowledged that his paternity, and he's there, alive and kicking. Any clue, anyone? He got married recently, by the way. The father got married. Who?
The Prince of Monaco.
Exactly. That's the Prince of Monaco. So, in a recent article, Alexandre won't be a successor to his father's throne. So that's the son. And basically, Albert of Monaco had a relationship. A lot of people, for many years, people thought that he was gay, and he was actually, why would I say that? He was fond of black women, so spent a lot of time with them. And so this is him here. And what happened was that the child was conceived. I think his girlfriend was from, or still is, from Cameroon. And I think one day they got into an argument, and she said, "This is your son, take it." And she drove and left the child in front of the palace in Monaco. So then, you know, the paparazzi and everybody, you know, knew the story and wrote about the story. And the father, you know, assumed his paternity and said, okay, well, you know, all these positions will be taken for this child to grow in a certain way, but of course he won't become the successor to his father's throne. That's an unofficial picture that you, but we see that it's the same person, and that's him here, who seems very bored. All right. Another, very often, you know, I think French people never really overcome the fact that, you know, there was no royalty in France anymore. So that's been always a thing. So sometimes, you know, some presidents are elevated to the status of kings. And there was one in particular who, in the middle of the 1990s, stirred a huge controversy in France. Because when he passed away, at his funeral, go ahead. Yeah, François Mitterrand. François Mitterrand, when François Mitterrand passed in 1996, there were two families at his funeral. His official family and his unofficial family. So the wife, his Sharon, attended his funeral, and the mistress and her child attended his funeral. That's his illegitimate daughter and the mistress. And the wife is not too far away. So everybody knew about this little secret, the dirty secret, and she became very popular. And before he passed, he fully acknowledged that that was his daughter. So this is not something of the past, it happens, and this is something that is very, that has always been there, you know. So whether we deal with different types of people, you know, I mean, but of course, you know, and that's what was interesting, I think, in my presentation here, is to see that we have a little bit of everything in history. You know, we have sex, we have, well, I mean, not in this case, but in the case of, that was the president, Mitterrand. Yeah, but what I'm saying is that, yeah, we have a little bit of everything here. You know, in this particular story of Louise Marie-Therese, womanhood, you know, the claim for throne, adultery, and so on and so forth. This is a very important figure, and still, you know, in the 21st century, some ink is still shed about her. And so when you talk to people, you know, whether they're from the young generation or the old generation, La Mauresse de Moret, the Black Nun of Moret, always rings a bell. So I'm very happy to have shared her story with her story with you. I'm not a scholar of Louise Marie-Therese, but I think this is a very important and very interesting chapter. So I thank you very much for listening to me, and I am very happy to take a few questions. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone? I give the microphone and you can.
No, we have a second.
Oh, okay. All right.
Questions too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There are some people who believe that one of the reasons that...
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Maybe I can give her a feedback.
It's a one. It's a one.
There are some people who believe that one of the reasons that Princess Diana is not with us anymore is that she was perhaps expecting a child by the African.
That's
So
true.
I'll say-
That's very
and that it was a conspiracy.
Yeah,
so
that's
that
true.
loyal blood wouldn't be passed on.
That's true.
Who was also an Arab, of course.
And there's that too. Yeah.
It happens all the time. There was the case of strong thermites.
Oh, sure.
Oh, God.
You know, some of the people who from the South were the major people who promoted segregation were indeed, you know, heads of families who had brown children. And so I just think it's unfortunate that we have to live undercover this way. And I hope that someday we'll all become colorblind, really.
I was going to piggyback on that. Our founding father, Thomas Jefferson, certainly is renowned in his relationship with Sally Hemings, and her offsprings live today. So,
So I'm just very intrigued with her life story and the portraits of her mother with Nabu. Is that how you pronounce her father's name?
Right.
So it's interesting to me that she was sent off to the convent. And I wondered if you'd come across any information about her wanting to leave, having a life outside of that. And also, if she was ever able to establish, you said the father disappeared, so I'm assuming then that she never had a relationship with him either. Or, well, she did have a relationship with her mother and stepfather and half-brother, but not with the father.
No, not with the father. No, she did not. There is no account at all. Well, I haven't come across any account stating that she tried to, besides this fiction, but that she tried to leave. And so, you know, I don't know about this one. And for the father, her real father, Nabo, apparently he was murdered, you know, so that was the end of the story. And dead before, I mean, she was able to even, you know, at her death, at her birth, he was already dead, so she had no, of course, relationship with him.
Hi,
Okay.
I'm really curious about Naboo, and I guess I'm trying to determine the age group in terms of how old was the queen and how old was Naboo when he was gifted to her.
Okay, so the queen was 20, yeah, she was not 30, I don't think she was 30.
She's about 26.
Yeah. And Nabo was very young, you know, maybe in his early 20s, you know, that much. So, yeah.
Do we know the ethnicity of the family that she was assigned to?
In Moret? Yeah, they were white. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in this country, certainly during slavery, it wasn't uncommon for white women to become impregnated by black men. But there was always a burying of the mistake, and I'm intrigued as to why this child was allowed to live.
Yeah, because queens were gotten rid of the lesser offenses.
Yes.
Yeah, that's Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. You know,
I wonder if it had anything to do with the fact that a number of her children prior to passed away.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
yeah,
kind of
because
like-
she gave birth to many children, some were able to live for a couple of weeks, but besides the Dauphin, yeah. So she's the only survivor.
I'm surprised the king would.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he almost rules the roost. Oh, yeah, I just find it interesting that the king wouldn't, he seemed to be, I mean, nice is maybe not the right word, but, tolerant of it.
Yeah.
It seems like I really think would be off with the two of them. So is there
That's a
any
more
rational-
radical end, yes, you're wishing, but no, I think, you know, at that time, you know, I mean, she died not so long after, you know, so, you know, she was very lonely, and I think, you know, probably one of her punishments was not to see the father anymore, that they were probably very close, you know, and,
Yeah,
I
so
think
maybe that was her punishment.
that's was her punishment, yeah.
She died in her 40s, I
Yes,
think.
yeah.
And
40, she was 45, 46.
Yeah.
Are you speaking of the queen? Diana?
Yes, the
The
queen.
queen.
Yeah.
Are there any other images of her other than a child and a nun before she goes in the convent? Was she a dwarf, or is there any mention
No,
of her
there
physicality?
is no
otherwise?
mission, there is no knowledge of, you know, her size or so, no, not at all. But she seemed, you know, represented, I mean, yeah, she seemed, yeah, nothing special about her.
Well, in working on this exhibition and with Dr. Spicer's guidance, I've learned a lot about the importance of portraiture during the Renaissance period.
Right.
And I was fascinated by the portraits of the Queen with Nabu, and especially the one where she's partially dressed.
Yes.
And understanding how those portraits were served as a means of documenting the lives of those people. It was also a status symbol. Many of them are portrayed with their slaves as a way of stating their status
Right.
and their wealth. And so now I really believe, because otherwise I don't think that that would have been allowed. if he were not so intimately involved in her life, for her to be, disrobed
Right.
and been painted in that way. Although nudity was seen very differently back then,
Right.
but knowing the relationship, I found those images, or that particular image, very striking.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
interesting. And one of the other things that I found very interesting during this whole process, again with listening and learning through Dr. Spicer, is that while she has worked on the Walters exhibition for 15 years, and presenting her findings through various scholars, the resistance that she came across when trying to state that those portraits of the Africans who were not portrayed as slaves, that they were not somehow evidence of the African status and the role that they played in a Renaissance if it were not for slavery or servant. So when we have the portraits of the diplomats or the man who is African and has on the gold and definitely a man of stature and
Right.
power,
Right.
somehow that became suspect. And because she didn't have any documentation outside of the portrait, it wasn't a legitimate means of evidence that this person even existed.
Mhm.
And so that portrait, again, to me, is so profound, and the many that you showed are so profound in stating Nabu's role in the royal families
Right.
and the offspring that we have here.
So that's very amazing. But I will shock you if I told you that you first saw the portrait that I showed you. You see the background that is different from this one.
Mm-hmm.
The first portrait has a dark background. This one has a clear background. Well, the reason why I chose this picture because I wanted to tell you that this was an official portrait. So again, the painter is anonymous, but this was commissioned by different kings, and I mean there was a series of portraits of kings that was actually that were created between 22 other pastel portraits from kings of France from 1681 through 1683 were created by the same artist. So our portrait that is here is actually among other portraits of kings.
Mm.
So that's amazing.
It is amazing.
See, the picture where she's nude and he's there doesn't imply that to me because I'm from the South.
Mm-hmm.
And the invisible man, we all know the culture from the South of, being the most intimate with the people that you work for, but like you weren't human. So you didn't count, her being nude in front of them. It's a non-human.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't think that
Mhm.
it's unusual that he's there with her,
Mhm.
partially nude. It's like he's not there. He's nobody. He's not a human being.
Mhm.
So we have so many stories of all kind of information or sexual acts taking place with human beings standing there around the room watching, but they're not human.
Right, yes, that's very
That's
true,
very
because
true.
they were seen as the other and non-human, which is why you can enslave them, because they were not seen as a human being, definitely.
And more so like
Exceptions.
accessories.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're accessories.
oh,
You know?
absolutely, and that's it, that's why the portraits, they're
Yeah.
an accessory, an extension
Yeah.
of something that they owned,
Yes.
part of an,
Yeah.
chattel.
I'm also curious just in terms of the story of slavery and just historically the slave experience in Europe as opposed to the slave experience in the U.S. or in the Caribbean or, parts of South America. My impression is that slavery in the U.S. was much more brutal and that in European culture, that slaves weren't necessarily seen as animals as much as they were in the U.S. Only because slavery, when you look at the origin of slavery, slaves were not always African. So I don't, my sense is, and from what I've read and just from working in museums, is that slavery in Europe did not take on the same brutality that it did in the U.S. So when I see that image, I mean, the result is a child, but I don't know that the relationship between Nabu and the Queen would necessarily have been equitable to the types of relationships that existed in the South and the U.S. I feel sometimes when I look at slavery or have read about slavery in Europe, the relationships aren't as, I don't know quite what the word is, but when I see, the pictures of slavery in the South, not the American, it takes on just such a different flavor, such a different brutality. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, in fact, I have many thoughts. Yeah. Slavery is slavery, whether it is in Europe or in the North America, it's slavery. The Europeans have a very fraught history with the African continent.
I'm sorry, what kind of history?
Very fraught history, with the African continent. There was, during medieval times, at the beginning of, and up to the beginning of the modern era, some exchanges between the African continent and Europe. Kings were receiving presents, they were receiving artworks, they were receiving jewels, they were receiving, so from their counterparts in Africa. There were some relationships, right? Which did not happen in this continent. Then, the end of slavery in France dates 1865. That's the end of slavery. And so, I don't know if you are aware of that, but you think it's 150 years. Whether so French people have a very, how would I say that? I was born and raised there, and I go there from time to time. So, but what I want to say is that when people look at me in France, I was born and raised in France, but I am an African. Here, there are several generations of you here. After the second, third generation, you're an American. And that's a huge difference. So when people look at me, first of all, my trajectory is very particular. I was the one in all these very, prestigious institutions. People are wondering, why do I speak so well French? Why don't I have any accent? One day I was in a cab and I had a bad day. This day I was really I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I took the cab, and the cab driver tells me, we exchanged some words, and he tells me, how come you don't have any accent when you speak French? I almost became violent. But I told him that I felt sorry for myself because I wished that I spoke my father's language with no French accent. So culture. One, you know, no matter who you are not part of the culture. And you can never be part of the culture. So that's our, I would say, that's our legacy from slavery, from colonialism. That is it. So that's a huge difference. It's in the attitude, my dear. That's it. It's huge.
And I think that the painting behind you speaks to that. That work is called Grande Dame Queenie by Amy Sherald. And she is talking about this African woman who's been stripped of her culture and forced to convert to European norms of dress and behavior. So we are still dealing with the vestiges of slavery on both continents, and identity and race, and still struggling to become part of what it is we seek to become, and identified as we choose to be identified, as opposed to these things being imposed upon us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, we talk about, the image of black, and let's say everybody knows, or probably if you don't know, let me know, I'll tell you. In the 19th century, the terrible history of Sarah Bartman. Do you all know who she was and what happened to her? Who doesn't know? And it's okay, I'll share with you quickly. Do you want to know? Hottentot to Venus. You all know who she was, what happened to her?
Yes, the Hottentot Venus.
Yes, so she was lured, she was a cousin from South Africa, and she was lured by two Brits who promised her the world if she just, you know, came with her to England. A lot of good things could happen to her. She left, never to come back again. It's a really heartbreaking story. When she left, in fact, she belonged to this man, and who treated her like cattle. She was sold several times to different places, ended up in a circus and in a cage. People, you know, going around, and she was dressed very, in very light clothing. People were making fun of her because she had a condition. It's called a steatopygia, which means that she had an enlarged behind. And so people, made fun of her. She went from place to place, was sold from place to place. And then she died. She was very young, in her early 20s. But even in death, she was not even able to rest, because she became a scientific specimen. Her body, there was a cast of her body that was made, and her genitalia were removed, and the genitalia were sold to Cuvier, who was heading the Institute of Natural History. Sorry, I'm thinking in French. In Paris, and then her remains for many years were displayed at the Museum of Mankind in Paris, resting in a formalin jar. She became a terrible, I'm sorry, I see that, it's making people very uncomfortable. But anyway, to make the long story short, she was called the untented Venus. And of course, again, it was a mockery, because if you think of a Venus, you have, you know, it's synonymous with beauty, with, you know, like, you know, it's the Venus epitomizes beauty. So that was not, you know, how Miss Sarah Bartman was perceived at all, let alone was treated. She died pitifully alone. And then people started, you know, writing about her. And in the I think it was mid-90s or something, oh yeah, in the 1990s, there was an international campaign started from South Africa, and then, well, anyway, I don't want to, you know, expand, but for the return of her remains, so she could have a proper burial. And she had a proper burial. So there is a fabulous documentary that I will recommend to all of you here by Zola Mazeko, and it's titled Sarah Bartman. If you have the possibility to view it, please do. But it's a very, very sensitive story, and so, you know, so it's about womanhood, it's about identity, it's about culture, race and everything, and it's very, very moving. So that's it.
Who is the author?
Name is, she directed and wrote, her name is Zola Mazeko. Yeah, Mazeko, Mazeko. Yeah.
Anyone have any other questions?
Any other questions?
Did you have any final comments that you'd like to make?
No, I mean, it's been a very interesting, you know, I would say, it was just food for thought, you know, nothing, you know, scholarly, or I was very, I did welcome your comments. Again, you know, it just stemmed from an interest I had, you know, coming across this very, very small, you know, text about this woman. And it is at the same time, I think it's, you know, it's history to start with. It's history, and it's important history. And so for me, I just wanted to know more. And when Myrtis very kindly invited me to talk, you know, I felt it would be great to introduce this particular lady to the group. So, but I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I think that her story is our story.
Yeah.
Because it's the story of the African whose life has been overshadowed by many things. And it's so fitting that you would talk about her during this exhibition, because those same issues we are still dealing with today: culture, race, identity, the other, and being overshadowed by so many things in terms of recognizing who we are, the greatness of who we are, and then our recognizing it and embracing it ourselves. And Jamia Richmond Edwards, her works in this exhibition pay homage to the African woman, because it was her observation when studying the Renaissance period and looking at portraits, how few featured the African woman. And we know that she was there. We know that she played an integral role in it. And all of the Africans, not just, again, as slaves, but they were an integral part of the Renaissance, the rebirth of Europe. And they played many roles beyond just slavery. And I think that's the point that we're trying to drive here. And the artist did such a beautiful job of researching, paying attention to what those contributions were within the context of the misperceptions, the devaluation, the overshadowing, and the neglect of recognizing them as human beings and recognizing the contributions that they were truly making as the court gesture, and failing to acknowledge the talent that it took to be a musician and the complexity of that. So I ask you, as you look at the works, now look at them again and revisit them within the context of Marie-Therese, Louise, I'm good, you say
Louise
it.
MarieTherese.
Within the context of her life, because you say it so beautifully, I cannot. And then also, if you haven't visited the Walters, I encourage you to do so. And also, when you do visit the Walters, visit the 4th floor where a group of young people have created works in response to the Walters exhibition as well. I've missed that. A gentleman came through the gallery on Thursday and couldn't say enough about it, and he was just blown away by their perspective, and then coupled with what he saw here, you know, it was just an amazing experience for him. So I'm going to go, and I encourage you to as well. I think a lot of people are just going through to see the Renaissance piece, but not the contemporary works by the Baltimore high school students.
Is tomorrow the last day?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's Monday, but I don't, if, unless they're they're open as a special event, they're usually closed on Monday. But you know what, they may be, because it's Martin Luther King, right, so they may be having special events. So I guess we will close, and thank you all again for coming. Continue to enjoy the food. If there's any more tea or any other food stuff you'd like, we have plenty, so enjoy. Thank you.